Is Noah's Ark for real? This is the question, and it's so important, otherwise it undermines our faith. We need to have our faith steadfast in these last days. You may have seen this before, but really I would say to you, this is far superior than its original broadcast. Watch it intensely. It's always scary, especially when we're talking about important topics, scriptural things that people would usually say, oh, that didn't happen, that was only a fairy story, or that didn't happen in the Bible, or whatever, you know. But the thing is, tonight, it's so important that we get this message across. So anybody out there who is a skeptic about things like, particularly like Noah's Ark, and some of the things which, you know, people have seen portrayed, it looks like a fairy story. Let me just tell you, look at the screen right now. This is a replica that's been built by Answers in Genesis. Answers in Genesis reconstructed this, and it is huge. It's gigantic. And you can see from the pictures there the size in relation to vehicles and people walking on the ground. You know, some of the things that people are so easily swayed against understanding the scriptures is that they see pictured a giraffe sticking out of a bathtub as a boat, you know, and two people on board. Well, we know that the amount of animals that would have had to have gone into the ark would have been so enormous. Although you can say that everything had to be according to its kind. So when people say you couldn't get every creature and animal on the boat that is described in the scriptures, but you've got to remember that God created things according to their kind. So if you take the dog family, you would have foxes and dogs. The cattle would be another kind. You don't have to take every one of those, just according to their kind, okay? So that makes it a lot easier for Noah to have accommodated such a large number. Now, all the things that were on the ark, there were special, you know, places for animals, and they had their welfare taken care of. There was a place for them to have the water, the food, and even the waste, the excrement, that was all taken care of. But it took Noah some 50 years, they say, to build the ark. And it was no little thing floating on the top of a water. I want to introduce my co-host tonight. That's Dr. Hugh Jackman. Thank you, Hugh, for joining me.
It's a pleasure, man. It's so exciting. This is an exciting program.
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to the content.
Do you know, I remember, we're going to show you a short introduction film in a second that Cyrus, our guy who's in charge of all the production here, has interviewed the man that's on the ground only yesterday. And this is someone I call Indiana Jones of the modern day, and that is Andrew Jones, and he is the one who's got God's grace and favor on his life to go and have a look at several biblical sites. And we're going to be looking at this tonight, as I say, where Mount Ararat was the place, and it's in northern Turkey, where the ark actually was first landed. And we are going to be looking at some of the reconstruction, if you like, of how this could have happened. But Hugh, you were saying how important it is, and it is important. It makes me very nervous, because when I do shows, I'm usually quite relaxed, but I want to get this across to everybody. Yeah. I mean, even Jesus referred to the ark, didn't he? Noah's Ark. So it wasn't a fairy story.
This has been referred to by the Lord Jesus. Peter referred to it. People do think that this is one of those events that just never actually happened. But, you know, I believe, Howard, that in the last days, as we get closer to the end, I believe God is going to allow lots of evidences to come forward, so that people who deny, they won't just be denying something, as you say, because it's like some fairy story, but they'll have to deny tangible evidence that has been presented. And I believe that these evidences that we're going to see tonight will be corroborated in the last days. The last of the last days will be absolutely 100% confirmed, and people will have no excuse.
Yeah. So what we're going to do is we're going to have a look at this video. This is Cyrus, who actually interviewed Andrew Jones only yesterday on site there in northern Turkey. Have a look at this.
Has the location of Noah's Ark finally been proven using 3D scans? The Torah tells us that the ark landed on the hills of Mount Ararat, a dormant volcano near the east border of Turkey. The Durapinar site is approximately 30 kilometers south of that mountain. In 1959, a cartographer named Ilan Dupinar discovered a boat-shaped footprint on top of a mountain in a region in Turkey. Now, American researchers and Turkish scientists of Noah's Ark discovered the project, which claims that they have proof that the biblical relic lies beneath the surface of Durapinar. Using 3D scans of GPR and ERT technology, they have uncovered a man-made boat structure beneath the ground before beginning any excavation. The formation identified in the scans, according to the team, matches the dimensions of the Genesis description of Noah's Ark. God's instruction to Noah was to build the ark and carry with him male and female of each animal. The text carries specific descriptions regarding the size and structure of the vessel. Length of 300 cubits, the breadth of 50 cubits, and height of 30 cubits. Cubits is a biblical term called amah in Hebrew, which means a forearm, and is estimated to be approximately 18 inches or half a meter long. We are now joined by biblical researcher Andrew Jones, who is at the site in Turkey to give us an insight into this incredible discovery. Andrew, are you there, and how are you doing?
Yes, I am. How are you guys?
We're very well, thank you, Andrew. Andrew, give us an insight. What is going on where you are? What is behind you?
Well, I am standing on one of the hills that overlooks the boat-shaped object found by Captain Durapinar in 1959. And this object that some believe to be the buried remains of Noah's Ark is what we've been researching over the last couple years, and which past efforts have been done by Ron Wyatt and others in investigating this site as the possible decayed buried remains of the boat of Noah.
Excellent. Now, you've talked about Ron Wyatt. For any of our viewers who may not be familiar, give us an insight into Ron Wyatt.
Yeah, he was an American explorer that first became interested in the site when he saw it in Life magazine in September 1960. A Turkish-American expedition came out here, and they had a write-up about that expedition in that issue of Life magazine. Now, he was not able to come out here until 1977, and then from that point on, he started his own investigations of this site throughout the 1980s and until he passed away in 1999. So he was a biblical explorer who really believed that this was the buried remains of Noah's Ark, and he also investigated other biblical sites in the Middle East, including the Red Sea crossing, the real Mount Sinai in the land of Midian, which is in northwest Saudi Arabia, and the ashen remains of Sodom and Gomorrah in Israel.
Give us an insight into your recent discovery and what have been your findings?
Yeah, so in 2019, there was an American geophysical survey team. Now, this type of team uses technology to peer below the soil using radar. There's other types like electric, and then they use seismic. And so on this trip, which the Science Channel filmed, they did two types of scans using radar. Now, with radar, they were able to peer below the soil all the way down to 20 plus feet, or a little over 7 meters. Now, on those scans, they were able to find right angles and parallel lines and perpendicular lines, things that you usually don't see in nature, that were only in this boat-shaped object right behind me. Now, ultimately, you have to do an excavation to ground truth, see what these parallel lines are, what the angular structures are. But when we showed this data to an American archaeologist who's an expert in GPR research and use for archaeology, Dr. Bigman told us that this is unusual, and that if he were to pick a spot for an excavation to see what's below the soil, he would pick this spot to check out these results. Now, a couple years before that, in 2014, Mr. John Larson of New Zealand, who is a remote sensing specialist using this same type of technology, he was able to get a permit to do ERT scans. Now, ERT uses electrical current to map below the surface, and then the software interprets that results on the computer and makes a 3D model. Now, the spectacular results of his work showed what looks to be a hull-shaped object right below the surface, below this boat-shaped object that we see on the surface in this mud flow area. Now, we are standing in the region of the mountains of Ararat, and this is exactly where Moses wrote in the book of Genesis that the Ark of Noah landed.
Andrew, can you just give us an insight into the Red Sea crossing?
Yes, so one of the projects that Ron Wyatt worked on in the late 1970s, he and his sons scuba dived in the Gulf of Aqaba. Now, the Gulf of Aqaba is one of the two branches of the Red Sea, the other being the Gulf of Suez. Now, the traditional Red Sea crossing that most scholars have looked at is at the tip of the Gulf of Suez or along the eastern border of the land of Egypt, so at the Bitter Lakes or one of those marshlands. But Ron believed, because of the biblical narrative, that they traveled day and night and that they were outside of the land of Egypt, where the Israelites were complaining at the Red Sea crossing, that this meant that the Red Sea crossing had to be on the other branch of the Red Sea, which would be the Gulf of Aqaba. Now, he actually hired an airplane back in the 70s, and he flew it along the Gulf, and he spotted a large beach that could hold the 1 to 2 million Israelites, plus the ancient Egyptian army that followed them. And this beach is called today Nuweiba. Now, if you look on a map, you'll see that this is a huge beach with only one entrance onto it, and that's called Wadi Watir. Now, Wadi Watir, that's the modern name given to this valley, or this dry riverbed that snakes its way through the wilderness mountains on the Sinai Peninsula there. So as the Israelites turned direction, according to God, according to the book of Exodus, God told them to change the direction. And they went down into this valley system and ended up at the Red Sea crossing beach. They were basically hemmed in by all the mountains. There was no escape. The Egyptian army was behind them, the Red Sea was in front of them, and they were surrounded, and they thought they had no hope. But God told them to be silent and move forward. And of course, we know that a great miracle happened, and the sea split in two. Now, in the late 70s and even in the 1980s, Ron was able to scuba dive at the southern location of this beach, and he spotted different coral formations that had distinctive features, some of them looking like chariot wheels, but he also found a four-spoked gold covered chariot wheel that's still down there somewhere, and other, in fact, I believe they found a couple of those, and then of course other coral formations that look like chariot parts. And so that was found on this Egyptian side of the Red Sea crossing. Now, if you go across the Gulf of Aqaba, about 10 miles across, you end up in the land of Midian. Now, the land of Midian is where Jethro lived, and he ended up being the father-in-law of Moses. Moses married Jethro's daughter, Zipporah. And so in the land of Midian is where Ron believed that the real Mount Sinai was located, not the traditional mountain that all the pilgrims and tourists go to in the southern Sinai Peninsula. This site was a site that was picked in the Middle Ages for the purposes of the church back then. But ultimately, if you read the biblical account, you find out Moses was with the flocks of Jethro's sheep, and he took them on a short journey, and he saw the burning bush, which happened to be on the mountain, called Sinai, and the mountain of God is another name to give it, or Mount Horeb. And so, if you look at a map, if you see where Jethro would have lived in northwest Saudi Arabia, it makes no sense for Moses to take the sheep of Jethro and go all the way around the Gulf of Aqaba down to the traditional Mount Sinai, which is a remote, desolate area. But right near where Jethro would have lived in northwest Saudi Arabia, there's the tallest mountain in the region. It's called Jebel Lawz. And this whole range has a number of peaks of interest, one being Jebel Makla. And it was at the base of this mountain that Ron and his two sons went in there illegally in 1984. They snuck in because they could not get a visa, because Saudi was a closed country back then. And it was at the base of this mountain that they found what possibly is the Golden Calf altar site, the altar of Moses, marble columns set up by King Solomon, and other features that match exactly what's what Mount Sinai should have, and that the Bible says.
Can you give us an insight into what's next? Have you got any other plans for your future?
Yeah, so on this site, I know the Turks, they have plans to continue their work, and so that includes, first of all, scanning the site. After that, they would love to core drill the site, which will give them samples of the soil as they drilled into the object, like a 3-inch hole. And then after that, they will determine if they're going to do an excavation. And so we're kind of on step 1 of this project, and it's a long-term project that we've partnered with the Turks on. Now, besides this project, we're also focused in on the Red Sea crossing and Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia, and just documenting that for people to understand these biblical stories, that they are true, that these events actually happen.
It's wonderful that you're able to bring these biblical stories to light as well and to reality. How important is it to have that relationship with Christ? I mean, this must be a very special thing that you're experiencing in your own life as well.
Yes, ultimately it comes down to knowing God. You can't just look at the science only, look at the data. These are tools that God has given us so we can reach out to those who are lost and those who are like doubting Thomas, who need to understand the Bible, but they need physical data, just like he did. And so, these are very important because not everyone has that type of faith where they can believe every little detail. And so God, who, he doesn't want anyone lost, so he has given us different types of tools to reach different people. And I believe biblical archaeology is one of these tools.
If people are watching us today and they want to be following your journey, following your discoveries, what online and social media platforms are you on?
We're on all the major ones. The easiest way to find us is to type in Discovered Media on YouTube, and I'll pull up our YouTube channel with all our different videos and updates. You can also go to the World Wide Web and look at our website. We have one about this project here. It's called noahsarkscans.com, noahsarkscans.com, and it gives details like the news updates, videos, project, the scope of the project. And so they can follow along there, and they can even contact us through that website.
Just want to say, Andrew Jones, biblical researcher from Discovered Media, thank you so much indeed for joining us, and God bless you, brother.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I do hope that's actually whet your appetite, because we want you to email in live@revelationtv.com. Is there something that's provoking you tonight to at least ask some deep questions about the validity of the account that's in the scriptures, chapter 6, chapter 7, chapter 8, particularly of Genesis? Let's hear from you tonight, live@revelationtv.com. You were saying earlier when we started this is such an important, exciting sort of opportunity here to discuss such biblical archaeological sites such as what we're hearing about tonight. There's so much more to do. I mean, Andrew was given like by God's grace, he was allowed into Saudi Arabia, which they've only just in the last couple of years let him in to discover all these sites. Traditionally, we've always thought of the Sinai being on the Egyptian side, or what was formerly belonged to Israel, and Israel gave it over to Egypt just a few years ago. And we can see that when you go through all of the things that we're going to try and share tonight in a very small amount of time, that the actual size to maneuver over 2 million people, the Egyptian side of the Sinai could not accommodate them, and we will see from what we're going to be sharing tonight that you needed to be in what was Midian, which is now Saudi Arabia, to have this extent and the beaches and the amount of landmass that would be open to accommodating 2 to 3 million people that were following to the Promised Land. Any points you want to raise?
It's just fascinating when you talk about that, Howard, because I had a conversation with someone who was an eyewitness or a friend of Ron Wyatt's, and he told me about how those particular discoveries took place, that he was Ron had hired a car and they were driving along the coast, and they had prayed beforehand. They said, Lord, show us where these sites are, show us where Noah's Ark is, and so on and so forth. And as you mentioned about the crossing points. And what happened was the car broke down 3 times. As they were driving along, the car literally stopped, and they would get out of the car and think, what's going on here? Maybe God's speaking. So they put a little pile of rocks in the 3 places, and then they went back and investigated and found the site apparently for Noah's house. This is how apparently these things began.
There's the B-roll, which we're going to see in a second, and we'll start to roll this because we can talk about this. You see here, there you've got the Gulf of Aqaba, and to the left you've got the Sinai Desert, which was known as part of Egypt. But you're looking here very carefully, you can see the size of the landmass of that beach would accommodate 2 million people or more. And here where you've got the yellow lines, you've got the fact that that particular part of the sea was the lowest level, so people could cross, even though you still need a miracle. And again, the land masses that you've got both sides in what is now Egypt, to the west, and then to the east you've got Midian, which was or is now Saudi Arabia. Huge land masses, you know. And again, when Moses actually came through Midian, because Jethro, as it said, was his father-in-law, and that's where he met him, you know, when he was on his way back. And all of these areas, the blue lines and everything, was where they were wandering for those 40 years until they actually were allowed to go into the Promised Land. Again, here, this is in Saudi Arabia today. You can see the huge land masses that you would need in order to, maneuver and accommodate 2 to 3 million people, because it was 2 million people without women and children. So by the time you add that, you're close to 3 million. And just look at that. What do you think of this?
It's amazing how you're taking me back to 2011, the first time I stepped foot in the Holy Land through Revelation TV. And as you were going around, driving around, and you could see the land, you could see the reality of it, and the Bible comes to life. And these pictures, literally, you can almost imagine the children of Israel trampling through this land, and you can easily see how they could be literally lost, wandering around in this land for so many years. It's fascinating because it corroborates the Word of God and it makes it more real as we look at it. It's amazing. Yeah.
So if you've got any doubts at all, anybody, don't feel, don't hold back from asking, because we don't know everything, but we have such a heart for biblical truth to come to the surface at such a time as this that we're living in, because we all need hope that there is a God and He has a plan for mankind, and He's predicted the things that would happen from long ago. And when you consider that the man of truth, if you want to call him that, I call that about Jesus, because He would never lie to people. He referred to the flood of Noah. He referred to the people who wandered for those 40 years. So we need to actually have this sort of evidence put before us.
Would you like to hear some
Yes,
emails?
please.
There's quite a few. Somebody sent this email about 3 or 4 times. It basically says, at last a program, this is Robert, hi Robert, at last a program about the real Noah's Ark found by Ron Wyatt for over 40 years ago. I've been trying for years to get you guys to look at this, he says. Ron Wyatt was used by God to reveal many other biblical archaeological sites, such as where Moses parted the Red Sea in the Gulf of Aqaba, Mount Sinai, the altar Aaron built, the rock that Moses struck, Sodom and Gomorrah, and the Ark of the Covenant itself, amongst many others. Many people dismiss Ron Wyatt's discoveries, but everything he did can be seen on film, and he's even put a link to them all. So that's really interesting.
Robert, let me just tell you, I actually interviewed Ron Wyatt in the late 90s or mid-90s. In our home, okay? We used to have do programs from there before Revelation TV existed.
I remember, yeah.
Yeah, and I all of a sudden he came to our home, and I was really embarrassed because we just stopped using the front room as a studio, and it was our bedroom again. And so he sat on the edge of the bed, and we tried to interview him with a camera, and it was just so hokey I didn't show it. But I was so fascinated.
Really?
Yeah. When Robert says, you know, about time, listen, I was into all of that, and I was showing it on TV programs that I was making in the 90s. Nobody was interested, but I was fascinated. Let me tell you, we might be a bit late off the mark here, but I've been going on about these things for many years. I'll give you another little example. When I came back from living in America, I went to Swindon, which was the only bookstore that was a Christian bookstore that sold the videos and the accounts on video, like of Ron Wyatt, Answers in Genesis, all of those sort of things. Leslie didn't know it, but I spent £500, which was about all we had in the bank. I've done this so many times in my life, but spend what we've had in order to get the videos, in order to get the accounts. And I used to lend those videos to people. I didn't get them back, though, unfortunately. It was lend, but they never came back. But the good thing is, here we are today. Anyway, let's hear from you more, live at revelationtv.com.
Yeah, amazing. Some really interesting emails coming in. Hi, Howard and Hugh. I understand that it took 120 years to build the ark. If you do the biblical maths, remembering that humans lived much longer before the flood, it's interesting that secular historians and archaeologists are now recognizing a global flood. I love to think that the work that Rob Wyatt's investigations on the Turkish side are authentic. He used a metal detector and a tape and discovered that the tape went in straight lines. He also found an anchor stones nearby. Somebody else saying the same thing. That's Marilyn in Wales. A lot of talk about Ron Wyatt tonight, which I think is great. That one coming again. Yeah. This is interesting to me, as over 40 years ago when I moved from London to Hampshire, I heard a talk on the BBC World Service about the Ark possibly being found on Mount Ararat. This has been around for a while, hasn't it, Howard?
Yeah. Well, it went back to 1956. In fact, even before then, there was a pilot that was flying around the Mount Ararat, early, 1900s, and he spotted this odd shape on the mountain, and that's where they began to do some of the inquiries as to what it was. Yeah,
Eve says she wrote to the programme at the BBC, and they did reply, but they said that there were problems as the people researching the possibility of the Ark could not get into Turkey at the time. That corroborates something you were saying earlier on.
Yes, I mean, Turkey closed it off.
Yeah,
they closed it off for quite a while, and there was a lot of controversy about it. But the thing is that what keeps coming up is the fact is that something unusual is on that particular piece of land that could very well be the Ark, and it has the parallel lines, as Andrew was saying, and the horizontal lines that would have come from the timber work of that particular structure.
Yeah.
And some of the other things that if you went to the Answers in Genesis site where they've got the reconstruction of the Ark, it is amazing. Inside they've got very clever engineering made of wood, so that that large structure, when in such waves and everything, would have actually been able to not collapse or split apart. And it's very intricate little blocks of wood. I think something like 3 million pieces of wood actually were used to construct that Ark, the reconstruction. So it was with the guidelines taken from Scripture of how that would have been in the days of Noah.
Howard, what's really amazing, just picking up on another email that was just said there when the lady mentioned about the longevity there. Your mic might need fixing there. It's not just about the discovery of the Ark, is it? Because it's more than that, isn't it? Because if the Ark is corroborated, which I believe it 100% is already, it also corroborates a lot of other details in the Bible that men did live for. Noah himself lived for 950 years.
This is an interesting point, Hugh, because the thing is that it was like Methuselah lived till 965 years. It was Adam lived to 930 years. And then what happened as creation had started off perfect, over the years people's lifespan got lower and lower and lower until the time of Abraham, 120 years, and Moses the same. And then now it's come down, and it's recognized in Scripture, it's referred to that man, if he lives 70 or 80 years, that's the average.
Yeah.
So we've deteriorated because we've moved far away from perfection. The things that God had created for us to live forever has now disappeared. But the important thing about the ark is that when you look at the Scriptures, it refers to it as being this particular vehicle to withstand huge amounts of water. Now, this is another area where people might think, how could rain, just pure rain, flood the earth? We're talking high mountains. Mount Ararat is a huge one. The thing is that what I'm trying to say is what happened at the time of the flood was the fountains of the deep came up, and there were, if you like, underwater sort of, eruptions, that actually brought the water from the deep part of underneath the earth, that crust. There was a whole amount of water that actually came up. So it wasn't just the rain that rained, but when you see that if you're thinking of covering the whole of the earth just with rainwater in 40 days and 40 nights, that would never happen. So people need to understand that there's a lot more that was released water-wise in the actual time of that flood.
Yeah, and there's also talks about the firmament as well that broke up, doesn't it? There was a theory with that. I don't know whether you hold with that or not, but there was a theory about the firmament breaking up, being filled with water. And that's, that
could have released a lot of water, because what happened in the beginning was it was almost like a greenhouse effect that God had actually set up in the beginning, so that at the night time the dew would fall, irrigate the land, because it was some would say like a canopy around the earth that was filled with moisture. Now, if that collapsed as well, then you get a huge amount of water that would cover the earth. But a lot of it's more to do with what was underneath the earth's crust that came up, and it says the fountains of the deep opened up, and together with that, the rain and everything else, the volume of water, and it took some 150 days for it to subside.
And let's think about what happened when God created the earth. Well, it says He created the earth with the waters above, the waters below. So the waters above are a lot of extra moisture that's not there today in the upper atmosphere. We have shallow seas on the earth, 1 mile deep in the Pacific, 1 mile deep in the Indian. There is no Atlantic. And down below the crust, the eggshell of the earth here is that layer of water, and then below that is the rest of the earth. Now let's think about what happened at the time of the flood of Noah. Remember, the earth has come like an eggshell with no cracks. But there's that layer of water down below, correct? It's that super hot water. Now, super hot water has tremendous force. Super hot water is perhaps the second most powerful source of energy in nature. As a matter of fact, I would like you to think about this. We do a presentation on Mount St. Helens, a relatively small volcano that erupted in the southwest corner of our Washington state on May the 18th of 1980. It's a relatively small volcano, but because of the super hot water coming up from below, it erupted with a force equal to a 20 megaton atomic bomb. That's what a little volcano can do. That's the equivalent of 20 million tons of TNT all going off at the same time. But it didn't stop there. It continued to erupt for another 9 hours, and in 9 hours it produced 430 megatons of energy. That's what this kind of water can do. So let's think. The earth is created like an eggshell with no cracks. There's a lot of extra moisture in the upper atmosphere. There's shallow seas on the surface. But below the eggshell is that layer of liquid steam, that accident looking for a place to happen. Millions of cubic miles of this explosive water. And let's think too, how could 3 continents move thousands of miles apart in only 1 year? Well, remember that the continents are floating on a layer of water. Remember that there's the waters above and the waters below. And let's think, how easy is it to push a boat away from a dock if the boat is floating on water? Well, even a child could do it, is that right? And so let's think about what happens at the beginning of the flood of Noah. Well, first of all, the waters knife through from below, breaking the eggshell up into big pieces. We call them continents, but they're just boats. And so they can slide away very, very quickly. At the beginning of the flood, super hot water and molten rock knife through from below, and Pangaea begins to break apart. The continents start to move sideways because they are floating on a layer of water. This process continues with increasing force, and the continents begin to slide downhill. As the continents are moving sideways, molten rock comes up. As it hits the seawater, it cools, forming new ocean floor. The continents are also sinking as the water comes out from below, and the continents are covered by about 1 mile of water.
It took a long time for that to actually come to rest on Mount Ararat, and then eventually Noah got a little bit more courage to send out the raven first, then the dove, and they sent out the dove twice, and because the first time it couldn't land anywhere, and so it came back, and the second time it came back with an olive branch to show that there was at last the waters were receding, and then the last time that nothing came back. So Noah had the courage to open up the hatch and walk out.
And it's not a fairy story, this is a real account. This really, really did happen.
Yeah, so what did Jesus say about it to corroborate this?
Wow, in fact, in the book of, if I go to the book of Luke, I think it is, Luke chapter 17, and verse 27, I believe, 26 and 27, the Lord Jesus spoke about the flood of Noah. He said, as it was in the days of Noah, so it will also be in the days of the Son of Man. And he said, they ate and they drank and they married wives. They were given in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark and the flood came in and destroyed them all. Just absolutely corroborating, not a fairy story, but absolutely telling us and assuring us that this really was a real event that really did happen.
Yeah, and see, to me, what Jesus was saying is that life was as normal.
Absolutely.
Okay? And in fact, I can imagine that people were coming up saying to this, let's go and watch this afternoon. It's Sunday afternoon, we're going to have a rest, we're going to have a look at this guy, this nutter, Noah. You know, he's talking about a flood coming. Oh, how ridiculous. Yeah. It never rained before because of this water canopy that surrounded the earth. There was no need for rain. For rain? Oh, don't take the mick. Anyway, so what they did is they found out all of a sudden that this was a reality. And Jesus was trying to draw the parallel that when he comes back again, people will say, oh, yeah, where's this promised present of his? He's not coming back. You are jokers. And of course, he said, no, just as the days of Noah were, so it will be when the Son of Man returns. Instantly, it'll be upon you.
That's right. Eating and drinking and giving in marriage. That's exactly what's going on in the world today.
Well, post-COVID it might.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. More emails, Howard. Lots and lots and lots of people want to pitch in on the programme.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, very interesting. Irene says, this is the evangelical equivalent of the Turing Shroud. You either believe it or not. American nonsense, says Irene. Do you understand her point there?
No.
Strange point.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, I understand the fact that there's a lot of, people's opinions within Christendom actually would vary. Today, with biblical archaeological sites being unearthed, it's a little bit different. You've got something that's actually been proven with this electrical magnet type of discovery as well, modern science. But we here to try and help people to understand that the biblical sites where these things supposed to have happened can be borne out with some sort of credibility.
A couple of people, I'll just paraphrase this so that you don't feel that we're ignoring you. A few people saying, we don't need this evidence, Jesus spoke about it, therefore it's true.
They might not.
Exactly.
But we're here for the lost. You that know everything, you switch over to the other channel, the BBC, and watch David Attenborough. Joke.
We shouldn't be surprised at the Lord's design, but isn't it amazing that the dimensions and the ratios of modern liners, I was thinking about that, are virtually identical to the ark, i.e. width, length and height. God was a great ship designer, obviously. Also, that the stability factors of the ark of metric center of gravity, center of buoyancy can't be improved today. We have a great God, says Duncan in Inverness, and he's absolutely right.
Yeah. I mean, this is the point. That some of the ships that were actually constructed in those days were done with great precision And because they didn't have steel that could be molded, they had to use smaller chunks of wood to actually turn the corners and make the shape, and that took a lot of doing. But when you think just how clever people were then, some people think, well, because we sort of evolved from apes, that and we were a bit stupid. When you look at some of the great structures in the world, like the pyramids, and how people mathematically designed those, and you've got the great constructions of ancient ships that were run on a very similar line to what God had instructed Noah to build.
Absolutely.
And he was meticulous with the way he did it. And you go to see Answers in Genesis reconstruction of that ark somewhere in America. They had something like 1.3 million people visit it already. It's just fantastic, and inside you've got all the cages and all the other things that Noah would have had to have had designed in order to cater for all those animals, 2 by 2. There were some that went in by 7 as well, by the way.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, so
it's the wisdom of God, isn't it, Howard? It's literally the wisdom of God, and I think we probably put ourselves a little bit too high. I mean, He's the first cause of wisdom.
What I'm after, if there are new people with questions, I don't want to hear, with all due respect, from Christians who believe already and say they don't need any of this stuff. Well, that's fine, switch over.
Just about to read you one.
I'm an evangelist. I don't want you. I want the other people who have questions, who are really genuine questions.
Jane has written, Jane Bond, she says, "Dear Howard and Hugh, thank you for this wonderful program. I have been eagerly awaiting more info on this subject. You are really helping me. Thank you."
Thank you. Good.
Love, Jane.
That's the sort of thing I want. That's not that I'm after everybody being positive, but I just don't need the people who know everything. That's for the other channels.
Here's a good question from Matt. He says, "Hi, my lovely brothers. I heard that some chariots have been found at the bottom of the Red Sea. Do you know if this is correct? If so, surely this is proof of the Exodus."
Yes, Ron Wyatt had found chariot wheels in the bottom of that particular area that was crossing over from the west side to the east side of what is known as the Gulf of Aqaba or the Red Sea. And they were there in that very area where it's at the shallowest end.
Amazing. Absolutely amazing.
If you looked up Ron Wyatt, and and if you looked up Howard Condy, you'd find a whole load of bad stuff about us. And what better way for the enemy to undermine your testimony by actually maligning your character?
I'm so glad you said
they did that with Ron.
Yeah, absolutely true. But I think that a lot of discerning people are beginning to say, hold on a minute. And, it seems obvious that there's a bit of a cover-up going on, because the thing about him, for me, Howard, is when you hear the videos of him speaking, it's the eyes. It's a bit like when you interviewed Ian McCormack all those years ago. Those eyes, when you look into a person's eyes and you see truth, you can't make that up. It's just not something you can make
Discernment.
up. Yeah, I like that, discernment, So look, just acknowledging your email, Brian, brilliant email, maybe a bit too long to read tonight.
Did I say earlier that the National Geographic channel have actually done the program so that they wouldn't do something that didn't have some credence,
absolutely,
credibility. So good on Andrew. Andrew is a lovely guy. He has dedicated his life, and he's also got grace and favor with the Saudi government, because they have kept all of these sites, which there are numerous in the Midian area, where Moses' well. They've got some of the prophets that had caves there, and all the different areas that the tribes of Israel went round. I mean, and they've been guarding this for years, if not centuries. And now you've got an opportunity to actually, have first-hand accounts from our dear friend Andrew. I have to say, he's gone through a lot of hardship just recently.
Really?
Yeah, both his parents died on the same day. The things that happen to dear men and women of God that are so honourable and so sincere, the devil comes down on you like a ton of bricks. So we don't need anybody else adding to that.
Yeah,
we need
especially
to pray for people when they're in frontline ministry.
Especially when they're revealing information such as this, which is which is so important, especially to the end times that we're living in right now.
Yeah, that picture you've just seen on your screen, it's where they've done this electrical, sort of scanning of where the ark could be, and that it's looking good. You can't just throw the baby out with the bathwater and say, oh well, it's maybe not a possibility. It's unusually shaped and also constructed, and just petrified, obviously now, all these years later.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Like we should be.
So the emails are just coming in and coming in and coming in. I'm trying to scan through, trying to get to the ones that...
I want people to ask a genuine question so we can help them. This is what it's all about. It's about helping people to come to a knowledge of truth.
But I will say, paraphrasing, a lot of the emails are saying, we want more programs like this.
Yeah, I'd like to do more.
Yeah.
And I mean, I used to do them when I was young. I still was in my 40s and 50s, but I'm 75, but I still, there's nothing more that I would rather do than try and come up with the things that would help you to have increase your faith and hang on to your faith. Because Jesus said, will I find faith when I come back? And when Jesus comes back, many of us are waning. And the Apostle Paul talks about people falling away from the faith. And he didn't just say it once. In the books that he wrote, it keeps saying that, Hugh. People fell away.
Yes.
And there are people today that are so involved in so many different things that they've actually are losing their faith. So it's programs like this that will restore your faith and give you confidence that what is written in the Bible is actually true. There's the good thing about the Bible is the good, the bad and the ugly. You read things in there, it's not trying to blow smoke up where. It's actually helping you to actually see the failings of mankind, but God loves us no matter. How about that?
That's good. Anita just makes a point that the Ark is significant because it was huge and such an amazing structure. Every culture around the world has a flood story.
Yeah.
I recall reading an ancient Mesopotamian account somewhere and a native Indian one as well.
Yeah.
What's really interesting...
The Aztecs, even up in the mountains in the higher places in Mexico and stuff like that, and down that part of the world, in the caves, Hugh, they've got these drawings that depict a flood. And let me just tell you, one of the things that I found quite interesting when I went to the Natural History Museum in London many years ago was they've got all the dinosaurs, and they know they were all in one huddle. I don't know if that's the right thing for a number of dinosaurs, but they were all there on high ground. So if you've got a flood that's chasing you up a mountain, and you're all together, where would you meet? At the top of a mountain. Mm-hmm. And they said, oh, it must have been an asteroid that hit the Earth, because they're all destroyed together. They wouldn't have huddled together looking at something coming down from the sky. They would huddle together because they were being chased by the water, the rising floodwaters. And that's why, and also they found not only the fact that dinosaurs existed, not billions of years ago, they've got footprints of men as well at that time when they were all drowned together.
Fascinating, really fascinating. John asks the question. Hi, John. He says, if the Ark was discovered in 1957, why is it only now it's being seriously investigated?
Because Turkey closed the doors on it many years ago because they didn't want people trampling around. And Saudi Arabia, with all due respect, did the same with all these biblical sites that are coming available now. It's only this year, I think, that they actually opened up to have people come and visit these sites, and you can see for yourself. But trust me, our friend Andrew is actually on the ground there, devoted his life to it. We're going to be doing a lot more. And let me just show you. Mount Ararat was not anywhere near the size of what this place is. And here we have it right here. This is where Andrew and his team are just jumping on the mountain there. But this particular place, which is in the Saudi Arabia peninsula, there you will see, and we'll be talking about that in a future program, if that will help you. So there's more to follow, as it says, on these biblical sites.
Very, very fascinating, Howard. This is interesting. And one thing I wanted to say, just also in response to John's question, is that don't forget also that one of the reasons why this is so important is because this story or this account is also in the Jewish history books, or even in the Muslim books. It's in the Pentateuch is in all the first 5 books are in the 3 main monotheistic faiths of the world. So this is why it's so important. If this is proven to be true, then you've got, you know, a whole lot of people who are going to be shouting that this is evidence that God is real. Okay, Maggie says, don't forget to mention that there were no mountains before the flood.
No, that's not true.
Okay, I'll read on, and then you can talk about it. Maybe just hills, so they were easily covered. The Bible tells us that the earth's crust broke up and slid all over the globe. Any response to that?
But yes, there are mentions of the high places in Scripture before, and Mount Ararat existed before the flood because it was there when they landed. And Mount Ararat is quite a few thousand feet high. It didn't suddenly come up.
If I stick a hole in the bottom of the boat, the water's going to go up and the boat's going to go down. At creation, there were seas 1 mile deep in the Indian and Pacific Seas. There was a layer of water 1 mile thick below the surface. As this water erupted upward, the seafloor falls down, exchanging places. As the seafloor drops, it breaks off along the original edge of the continental shelf and drops down 1 mile. This action leaves a double continental shelf.
And you see all these rock formations, especially in the Middle East, where you've got rapid layers of mud laid down in an instant, that with all of the different layers, you might want to call them, if you go, I suppose the people who believe in millions of years actually will say, well, this came over one particular set of millions of years, and the next layer, and the next layer. But why? How come when you've got the Cambrian or whatever it is called, the different layers, and you've got a tree that's going through several layers? Okay, that can't happen, can it?
Yeah.
Unless it's like what happened recently.
Today we now know that there are at least 40,000 tree trunks standing bolt upright on the bottom of the lake that were not there, didn't grow there originally.
That was all done, and it had the same effect as what it did at the time of Noah's flood, where all the things and the trees and everything were starting to be like this. They weren't flat. It didn't flatten it. We do have enough information to at least start you thinking about the accounts in the Scripture as being true. And for me, if Christ said it, he's never a liar. He never ever lied to mankind. If he said it, you need to take notice.
Amen. It's all coming. Last days are here.
I think it's appropriate that I read some scriptures now, just to give the background as to why God brought the flood, etc. Reading from chapter 6 in Genesis, verses, let's start from 5. It said, "Then the Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great on the earth, and that every intent of the thoughts of his heart was only evil continually." My goodness, what an observation and what a statement against mankind. And that was only like 1,500 years after creation. God was already seeing how horrible mankind was. I think it's pretty much the same today, is it not? Anyway, carrying on, verse 6, "The Lord was sorry that he had made man on the earth. He was grieved in his heart." And I believe that grieving, as I say, was to the extent where he was weeping. And when I'm grieved, I weep. And so I'm sure the Lord was doing that too. And verse 7 says, "And the Lord said, I will blot out man whom I have created from the face of the land, from man to animals, to creeping things, and to the birds of the sky, for I am sorry that I have made them." How tragic is that, eh? How sad. "But Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord." And these are the records of the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man, blameless in his time. Noah walked with God. Noah became the father of 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth. And now the earth was corrupt in the sight of God, and the earth was filled with violence. God looked on the earth, and behold, it was corrupt, for all flesh had corrupted their ways upon the earth. Then God said to Noah, the end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth is filled with violence, and because of them, and behold, I'm about to destroy them with the earth. My goodness, I just realized not only was he going to destroy mankind, he was going to destroy the earth. Wow. And all the animals and everything in it. Wow. What a revelation. Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. You shall make the ark with rooms, and shall cover it inside and out with pitch. This is how you shall make it. The length of the ark will be 300 cubits, its breadth 50 cubits, and its height 30 cubits. You shall make a window for the ark, and finish it to a cubit from the top, so that the water wouldn't enter into the boat, of course. You shall make it with lower, second, and third decks. So there's 3 decks. And behold, I, even I, am bringing the water upon the earth to destroy all flesh, in which the breath of life from under heaven, everything that is on the earth shall perish. Wow, what a statement. What an act that could have happened. But if it wasn't for Noah, a righteous man, we would all have not been here. Wow. Okay. And then we have the account in chapter 7 where the animals are all brought to Noah, and all the creatures that God was saying and instructed Noah to bring into the ark. It came about after 7 days that the water of the flood came upon the earth. Chapter 7 verse 11 says, in the 600th year of Noah's life, in the 2nd month, on the 17th day of the month, on the same day, all the fountains of the great deep burst open, and the floodgates of the sky were opened. The rain fell upon the earth for 40 days and 40 nights. And on the very same day, Noah and Shem and Ham and Japheth, the sons of Noah, and Noah's wife and the 3 wives of his son, with them, all entered into the ark. They and every beast after its kind, and all the cattle after their kind, and every creeping thing that creeps on the earth after its kind, and every bird of its kind, and all sorts of birds. So they went into the ark. And just let's pick it up in chapter 7 verse 18. It says, the water prevailed and increased greatly upon the earth, and the ark floated on the surface of the water. The water prevailed more and more upon the earth, so that all the high mountains everywhere under the heavens were covered. That's interesting, because we did have a viewer ask about, or mention, we had a viewer mention in an email that said that the mountains weren't there before the flood. Well, that's not true, as you can see from here. Chapter 8 of Genesis reads, but God remembered Noah and all the beasts and all the cattle that were with him in the ark, and God caused a wind to pass over the earth, and the water subsided. Also the fountains of the deep and the floodgates of the sky were closed, and the rain from the sky was restrained. And the water receded steadily from the earth, and at the end of 150 days the water decreased. In the 7th month, on the 17th day of the month, the ark rested upon the mountains of Ararat. Again, the mountains are mentioned here that had obviously pre-existed the flood. The water decreased steadily until the 10th month. On the 1st day of the month, the tops of the mountains became visible. Then it came about that at the end of 40 days, Noah opened the window of the ark which he had made. And he sent out a raven, and it flew here and there until the water was dried up from the earth. And we know eventually the dove was sent out as well. And we all know the story about the dove that came back with an olive branch eventually, indicating that there was, the waters had receded enough to be able to get to the tops of the olive trees. I just think it's amazing, really, that all of this is written down. And we might think, well, okay, Was it a fairy story? Was it just an allegory? Jesus referred to it, Peter referred to it, and other scriptures there confirm that this was a real historical event.
It's all coming. Last days are here.
Yeah. Oh, we've only got 20 seconds. Well, I'll tell you what, first of all, big thanks to you.
Oh, pleasure.
Big thanks to Kyle, who's doing the mixing and also did a lot of the editing, and to Cy, and also to Andrew Jones. I call him Indiana Jones. But also thanks to you as well for writing in. I'm sorry if I've been rude, it's just me. God bless you. Enthusiastic.